Welcome into the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel. I'm John Vogel, your host, and we are going with quarterbacks today, guys. And so, again, want to thank you all for the support that you guys have given us. We've had some pretty awesome success here so far. A couple videos, 1,000 views in the first 24 hours. We got a great guest on here today. But first, we got Shane with us in the studio. Shane, go ahead, hit it.
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel.
With the first pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the first pick in the 2022 NFL Draft, with the first pick in the 2023 NFL Draft.
The sickest NFL Draft show. It's gonna be sick.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome into the Quarterbacks episode. Joining us now is Justin Gamble, my co-host. As always, Justin, brand new mic. Welcome to the professional
now,
son.
My old one got crushed in the move, man. I opened up the box and there it is, just dead to the world. So time to upgrade.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Well, now everybody can hear you. You sound good. You sound good. You sound better.
I feel good. Good.
You feel better. Absolutely. That's good. That's great. So quarterbacks today, we got a really special guest with us, and this is a good friend of mine in the industry, Coach Tom George. This man is a ex-Navy admiral. I don't know if I can say that about the Navy, not the Marines. I think that's how that works. And 20 years, really solid guy. He's also a two-time state championship winner for two different states. Let's go ahead and bring Coach Tom George in, and CEO of the QB Impact Academy. And really happy to have you here, Coach. How is everything on your side of the world? And we're frozen.
We immediately have a freeze. Coach, do we have you?
Here we go. Now we got you, Coach. We got you.
Yeah, I apologize. You knew something was going to happen. So anyway, I apologize. I'm humbled. You guys had me on. I will. I'm a retired senior chief in the Navy, so I wanted to make sure that I didn't take credit for anything you were giving me. But I appreciate the admiral check.
Well,
no. Trust me, I appreciate. I wish I was getting the admiral retired paycheck. I'm a retired senior chief. Did 25 years in the Navy. So
that's the problem. Is I'm Army, and you're Navy.
I appreciate you guys having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. The problem is I'm Army, you're Navy, and we have a big game every year that is kind of a big deal. And so, like we obviously respect each other, but I don't know all your ranks and positions, so I do apologize for that. I didn't take the time to learn.
No. Brother, no worries at all. No worries at all.
So before we get into these questions and stuff and start talking about the quarterback position, I want people to kind of understand a little bit about you and what you do. Because first off, QB Impact and that academy that you have set up that's over there, it's exploded the last couple of years, really. And with the amount of quarterbacks that you guys have, and you have several coaches that work with you now. And so talk a little bit about that and how that you kind of got into this side of the football world.
Yeah, I was blessed to kind of start my coaching career in Florida. And it doesn't, Florida, California, and Texas are kind of the big three in the country. And a lot of guys that don't live in those states probably don't agree with me, but statistically that's the truth. And with a little bit of tidbits from obviously the South and Louisiana and Georgia, but most Division I and NFL guys come from those states. So I was blessed. I coached on a powerful team in Florida. So I used to have, Urban Meyer, Nick Saban, and Steve Spurrier back in the day, and those guys used to be on campus quite a bit recruiting our guys. So I built a lot of relationships with those guys, and I got fortunate. Those guys would come around and see me coaching quarterbacks, so I built kind of a network, and I got to do I got to go to University of Florida as a guest coach at one of their camps, one of their QB camps when Urban Meyer was there, and I've been blessed to do that. And then of course, at the end of my Navy career, I built QB Impact, and for me, I didn't just want to be another football academy, because I feel like there are a ton of guys that just train quarterbacks. And really what I wanted to do is provide a platform for young people so that we could use football as our platform. We could train guys to be elite QBs, but at the end of the day, I wanted to be a resource for them and their families. I wanted to talk about character. I wanted to talk about treating your parents with respect. I wanted to talk about academics. So although it's a football academy and my skill set is coaching quarterbacks, man, I'll be honest with you, I take more pride in the men that we're developing at QB Impact, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, and that was one of the big things when you came on a couple of years ago. I think it was the JDV experience that you did with me, and we talked about this build up and all of that. It's a great episode. It's up on YouTube and on your favorite podcast platform. But you're about to do that event at the AT&T Stadium in Dallas, and I think you had 150 kids signed up for that as well that year, maybe more. I might be undershooting you.
Yeah, we had 200, and I do a big camp every summer. I don't do camps all year long. I think there's plenty of football camps out there, good and bad. So I do one big camp every summer, and we've been blessed. I partnered with the Dallas Cowboys, and most recently I used a phenomenal high school in Texas, and we had 194 this year, and last 2 years prior to, we had 200. So it's been good. We've had guys, almost my entire coaching staff are ex-NFL or college guys, and we have guys. I don't market anything I do as a way to get to college or get college offers, and a lot of camps do, and most of them aren't successful at it. But we've had kids leave our camp every year. We had five college offers happen on site at our camp this year, and then last year we had 4. And that's just based on college coaches on site and seeing kids work over the weekend and spending time with them. So, man, that's why we do it. And then, of course, I do a couple seminars for parents. And the game has become such a solicitation machine for young people, and it's turned into business and money that we forgot why we started playing the game in the first place. So I try to educate parents and help their athletes, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yep. And the last thing I want to point out is I have a newfound respect over the last couple of years. I've been doing some high school football. This year I've been helping out with a local team a little bit when I'm able to, and I'm calling their games. I called the playoff run. I was part of the playoff run this past year, but, leading into taking over, I have a whole newfound respect for the fact that you've won state championships in 2 different states.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
One of them being Florida, correct?
Yeah, well, Florida and Oklahoma, and to be totally honest with you, man, I had really, really good players, and our team in Florida, our entire offensive line, I can quickly say it. My left tackle went to Ole Miss, my left guard went to Miami, our center went to Air Force and then Central Florida, and then our other right tackle went to Duke, and then our left guard was the state champion weightlifter. So we had a lot of talent. We were really good. My son was the center on the Florida team, and then my other son was the quarterback on the Oklahoma team. So that's pretty cool too, to have to be coaches on those 2 teams that my boys were playing on. But don't get it slipping. The other coaches may take credit, but we had really good players.
No, absolutely. But you still have to go out there and you still have to win the games.
Yeah,
that's why we play the games, right? And that's the toughest part. It's a gauntlet. The state playoffs, especially in Florida, like that is everybody's got good players down there in Florida. So
yeah, and you got to think about it, right? You play 5 games in Florida to get to the state title game, right? So if you think about it, you play 10 high school games and then 5 games, right? That's half a season. So those teams that advance in the playoffs every year, they're always going to continue to be better because they play so many more games than everybody else. And people don't realize how much that makes a team better. Those kids literally, over my 3 years at Jones, Oklahoma, where I won a state title in Oklahoma, those kids played 3 to 4 more games than everybody else every year because we were very talented.
Wow. Absolutely. Yeah. No, that is huge. And you're doing it against better competition once you make it into that tournament as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And that helps as well. So let's get into some quarterback talk here, Coach, because that's why we got you here, is to talk about the position, and we've got a pretty good lineup, I think, to get us started with the conversation. But what's the first thing that pops to you, or that you're looking at when you're watching a quarterback?
Man, a lot of guys get caught up in the arm and their ability to escape. And although those are all cool things to have, man, if they're not calm in the pocket, none of that matters. And, so when I watch film on high school guys, because that's what I do, right? I watch film on high school guys, and then I recommend them to colleges. And number one, I want colleges to trust my evaluation, because most guys have no idea how to evaluate film. And that's really a bad thing in this country right now, is guys really don't know how to evaluate film. So when that kid takes a 3-step drop and makes a rhythm throw, and the right guard, misses his block, I like to see how he reacts. Does he have any calmness in the pocket? Does he tense up? Does he panic? Does he look at his feet? So, for me, I saw an ESPN special a couple of years ago on Tom Brady, and he spoke about mental calmness. And that's kind of what I try to teach our guys, is if we spend so much time working on speed and agility and working on throwing mechanics, that if the way to practice mental calmness is to learn the playbook, study coverages, and do the things you can do at home. And kids don't do that enough. Kids win on athleticism instead of their brain. Tom Brady won games with his brain. And Peyton Manning. So I truly believe that, for me, it's important for kids to understand the playbook and understand the defense gives you the answer every single play. And I try to tell my kids that if you understand coverages and you understand schematics and you understand scheme, you actually have an answer to every question pre-snap. You just choose not to study that portion of playing the game. So to me, that's where mental calmness comes from, is slowing the game down, so you kind of understand defenses and the offense you're using. Absolutely.
Justin?
Well, first off, excited to talk to you today, Tom. Man. I'm excited to pick your brain. Also, my dad's gonna have a blast listening to this episode, being a former military guy, and listening to you talk about like respect for your family and just respect for other people in general and competitors. That's amazing. So he's gonna have a blast hearing this. But
man, I appreciate that.
Yeah. What I was wondering, we and John were talking yesterday, and I was just curious because I've been in this industry for a while now and seen all the different levels: high school, college, NFL. I played college myself, but when you are training or evaluating, mostly training quarterbacks, what are a few different things maybe that you do differently on the the different levels? So when you're training a high school kid to go to college versus a college kid to go, what kind of different things are you harping to them, or making sure this is what you need to do, this is what you need to do? How does that differ?
Yeah, so the first thing I teach all our kids, and we have a youth program, by the way, and I have a youth guy, and all the way up to college guys that I train. And one thing I tell every single one of them is, be successful at the division you're at. Okay, so if you're a really terrible middle school coach, you shouldn't be worried about college recruiting. You should be worried about being a middle school or football quarterback. If you're the JV quarterback, you shouldn't be going to camp at Alabama. You should be worried about being a varsity JV quarterback. So the first thing I tell them is slow down and be great where you are at. Because there's kids right now in 5th grade that are worried about recruiting, and it's baffling to me, but that we don't have, that's a parent thing, which we don't have to get into right now. So for me, what's the most important thing to me for every quarterback from the beginning is their lower half, their feet and their hips, and that doesn't mean do 1,000 ladder drills during training, but that does mean getting your hips and your feet in the right place before you throw. We spend so much time on understanding arm angles and arm slots when we don't spend enough time on the lower half. So for me, the first thing I do is I talk about stance, and I teach a staggered stance, right? So I would now I'm also not teaching robots, okay? I don't want them to be robots, because I understand that you can't sit in a pocket and your feet can't be perfect all the time. But I do believe that if you train your feet to be staggered, you will be staggered most of the time. So I teach a staggered stance, and I think most successful guys and guys in the NFL teach that. And it basically, if you're a right-handed thrower, I would like the left foot slightly back, slightly more back than your right foot. That way, when you throw to each angle or each portion of the field, it's the same jab step, right? Because young guys like that get a wide base because they feel like they get power from their base instead of power from their back leg. So what I try to do is I try to work on consistency within their base and within their stance. Again, you don't always get to throw with perfect base and stance, but if you teach kids to do it the right way, then we're hoping when they have a clean pocket, they can drive the ball into the window they need to throw into. So for me, and again, you know, I'm first of all, I'm not a genius, right? This all started years before me, and I studied Aaron Rodgers quite a bit, and Aaron Rodgers talks about how he spends more time on his lower half and his hip rotation than he does his upper portion of his body. And if you watch Aaron, you know, he throws with his lower half, right? So at the end of the day, I spend almost literally 60% of my time on the lower half, getting consistency in your base, finishing or starting with a staggered stance. I have guys put bands right above their knees so that when we do base work, their thighs and their feet get consistent so they don't get too wide. And I try to develop that muscle memory.
Oh, I love that insight, man. Love that. And I'm glad you brought up Aaron Rodgers too, because I've seen a lot of people say he's just an arm thrower. He does, but if you ever watch him, a lot of those little quick flicks downfield and everything, his hips, he does that little hip flick where you can see his lower half's turning, and he's getting all of that motion. It's just so subtle, but I think it takes a keen eye to see that.
Yeah, first of all, Aaron Rodgers is all hip rotation. He is not an upper body thrower. Aaron, Aaron's core is probably pretty phenomenal. Like, he's all core and hip rotation, in my opinion.
No, I agree. I'm glad you said that.
No, I told you. What did I tell you, Justin? I said, when we start asking, he's going to go straight to the base. That's going to be good. Where do you think I learned it from? This guy.
It makes perfect sense, right? If you and the staggered stances too. I don't know why guys want to argue that. Why would you want to close off the field, right? So, you know, it's kind of like a boxer. When a boxer boxes, he's in a staggered stance. That's the strongest position you can be in. That argument doesn't make sense. And I don't understand why quarterback guys have it, because it is what it is. But yeah, I'm going to always go right to the base. It's kind of like the philosophy of the arm dropping. We get caught up in, we'll see a young guy throw and say his arm drop. Well, what we don't realize is the body moves together. So if the arm drops, it's possible that his back hip dropped through rotation. Mm-hmm. So what I try to do is, instead of yelling the arm drop, like everybody else is yelling, I try to look at his hip to see if in rotation that right hip is lowering. And if it's lowering, it's possible his shoulders and upper half are coming with him. So a lot of times we get caught up in seeing things that look like they're the problem, but we don't realize that the body functions together. So let's start with the lower half. And if you get the lower half athletic and tall, it's most likely his arm's going to be where it needs to be also.
No, that's a good point too, because when you're teaching someone how to run properly, right? It's one of the first things that you go to. It's arm movement. It's because your arms naturally are in sync with your legs. You know, if you take a left step, your right shoulder leans forward, and so pumping your arms is going to make you, most of the time, make your legs move faster. So, you know, when you're at like that, you're right on point here when you're talking about, you know, your hip and that dropping and that being the reason why the arm drops. But again, it's something I just hadn't put together, you know, and that's why we have you on the show, Coach, because you got all this insight, and this is what we're sitting here taking notes, and we're going, hey, we're going to be looking at quarterbacks this year, and we're going to have a lot to say about quarterback. This is a great quarterback class upcoming in this draft that we're going to have to talk about. And here we go. Here's some of the stuff we'll be quoting Coach Tom George on it, right?
Man, I appreciate it, and I promise you, it came way before me. So feel free to use as much as you can, brother.
So when you're a coach and you're trying to figure out how to help a quarterback, I think you just pretty much answered this question, but we'll go. I had it written down. So what has more weight to focus on? Is it natural arm talent or is it mechanics?
Well, first of all, I think you always focus on mechanics. However, you know, Reggie Miller was one of the greatest shooters of all time, and his shot is terrible, right? So so what I'm saying is I do think there is something about natural talent, right? So if I get a kid who's a high school player and he's an absolute stud and he's throwing it in tight windows and he's getting out of the pocket and he's moving and his base is good, I'm not going to change him. Okay. I may talk to him about refining it and cleaning it up, but the last thing I want to do is change success. Not everybody does it perfect. And again, I think the goal is not to create robots, right? So at the end of the day, yes, I think sometimes there's really gifted young men with natural talent, and the best thing you can do for them is not change them, but refine them. Now, don't get me wrong. If he's a youth football player, we're going to change him. We're going to clean up his mechanics and get him molded. But at the end of the day, I think everybody should have a baseline of mechanical work. I think, there's a reason Tom Brady, we can argue if you want, but Tom Brady is the GOAT to some, and he goes to a quarterback coach, Tom House, right? The GOAT goes to a quarterback coach. So what I'm saying is even Tom Brady believed that he needs to refine his skills. And by doing that, he went to a private quarterback coach. So I think mechanics and a baseline of mechanics is where we should all start. However, I'm not changing a gifted young man.
Side question. Can you explain what Phillip Rivers, how did Phillip Rivers get velocity on any throw of his ever? I've studied his motion so many times, and it's never made sense.
I'll be honest with you. Phillip Rivers may be one of those guys that that came from Mars and just does it the way he wants to do it. I can tell you right now, when I saw him at North Carolina State, I watched him live. So I was blessed. I was on the sideline at the Gator Bowl when Phillip Rivers was at North Carolina State. They played Notre Dame, and I was a Notre Dame fan. That's how I got tickets to the game and got on the sideline. And I watched him go up and down the field against Notre Dame's defense with that motion. And that's a perfect example, though. If you notice, he had it in high school. They didn't change it in college, and they definitely didn't change it in the NFL. And the guys got, the numbers to arguably go into Hall of Fame someday. But that's probably a good example of your question, though, is Phillip played big-time Division I football, so those guys in the NFL just rolled with it, right? Why change it?
Right.
All-time favorite
so
player.
Ugly for so long.
All-time.
He's such
My
a
all-time.
dog.
Yeah,
He's such a dog.
Dude.
He talks so much trash. I loved it.
All-time favorite player was Phillip Rivers.
And no curse words. He does it without any curse words.
1,000%.
Yeah.
1,000%.
It's so funny.
It's insane. It's insane. That almost makes trash talking more intimidating when you
makes
can
it
do
hurt
it.
more. You're like,
Yeah,
It's way
you're
worse.
not-
It's way worse.
You're not even cursing at me right now.
No. Yeah, it's way worse.
He was
Oh,
great,
geez.
man. So go ahead, Justin. You got a question here, I think.
yeah, I did actually. I've played high level sports my whole life, and it's always been when I watch quarterbacks. This question weighs on me more than anything, and it's so confusing because we watch guys like Lamar Jackson, Mike Vick, Justin Fields now, and I always wonder. And Steve Young briefly talked about this one time, and quarterbacks that are so good at running, so good at they're elite runners, or they're so mobile, and that's such a big tool to their game. When you train one of these guys, is there part of you that works to kind of train that out of them? Because every rep that they run the ball or bail themselves out with that's a passing rep that they didn't get. Like in practice, if there's, a guy running a deep dig and the corner is blanketed on him, Peyton Manning can't move. So he's got to figure out ways to locate that ball or use his arm velocity. Like he has to pass it. If you can just run out of it, you'll never get to see and test yourself and make that throw and figure out how to do it consistently or succeed at it. So when you're training a kid who's got so much in his tool bag, is it almost easier? Is it harder? What do you tell him to get him to be a consistent passer while also allowing him to be that athlete that he is? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And I will say, I don't like to compare Vic and Lamar and the rest of those guys you mentioned, just because Vic and Lamar are different runners, by the way. They're completely gifted runners. Steve Young was a good runner in the West Coast offense, right? Like his offense wasn't even conducive to a QB running. Steve was just a pretty good runner. But at the end of the day, to answer your question, I don't. The Peyton Manning comparison is hard because here's the thing with QBs, right? You have to have a couple of tools in your tool bag, right? Number one are your feet. Can you run? Your arm, you have the ability to throw into windows and throw it downfield, and then the mind, right? Peyton Manning has a better mind than all those guys we talked about, except maybe Steve Young because he had a phenomenal QB mind too. So what I'm trying to say is Peyton Manning didn't have to have feet because he didn't have to run from people because Peyton Manning knew what to do with the football pre-snap every single play. Same thing with Tom Brady. So what I would say is some of those attributes those guys don't get enough credit for, right? The reason they didn't need to use their legs is because they were so gifted mentally in the game. 90%, if you watch Tom Brady, he throws quick game almost every play. And most of the time, his offensive line doesn't even have to block too long because the ball's out of his hands. Well, unfortunately, Vic didn't do that, nor does Lamar, right? So they have to use their legs. And so it's a little bit skewed when you look at those guys. But at the end of the day, I think in today's game, okay, if you want to put the big five on paper, they all use their legs. Even Aaron Rodgers has good legs, okay? Yeah. So at the end of the day, if you want to succeed in college football and make it to the NFL, you have to have good athleticism and good legs. Nobody in college plays downfield anymore. Everybody plays with their legs. The RPO game is here to stay. I remember 5, 6, 7 years ago when everybody talked trash about the RPO making it to the NFL and how the NFL would never adjust and the NFL is too good. There's too much speed and you can't do RPO in the NFL. Well, guess what? Teams winning the Super Bowl are doing RPO. So at the end of the day, RPO is becoming a facet in the NFL because it's a way to eliminate a defender without blocking him. Okay. And now you're taking guys with legs and giving them open windows to throw the ball downfield. So for me, I'm the other way around. I'm willing to take a guy who's a great runner and help him mechanically turn into a great thrower. So he has two facets. I'm training a high school kid right now that could probably play Division I football as a receiver, but he can throw the ball downfield and he's going to be a phenomenal dual threat guy. So unfortunately, in today's game, you're going to have to use your legs a little bit. And the top 5 or 6 dudes in the NFL are capable of doing that. Patrick Mahomes can use his legs. He's not a runner. Okay. He's not running run game plays, but he has the ability to use his legs. And obviously the most underrated runner right now is Josh Allen. Josh Allen's a machine.
You said that.
He just doesn't, and he's 6'6" doing it. So at the end of the day, Jalen Hurts proved that by using your legs and throwing the ball and being smart, you can win the Super Bowl. I don't think what they did with Lamar was smart. Now, no disrespect intended because they won a lot of games, but that's going to add up to that young man. He's going to start getting hit a lot more. And when you do a lot of quarterback run game, that's different from RPO now, right? RPO is reading a single player and handing it off or running it and then throwing it. So there's options there. Baltimore was flat out running quarterback counter and quarterback power and quarterback wide zone. Like that's a totally different facet of the game now. So I don't think that is successful. I do not think teams that go 1000% QB run game is the way to win Super Bowls. But I do think having a quarterback that can use his feet, that can read the field, that can drop back and throw a dig or a post, or he can read that RPO defender and throw a slant or hand it off. I think that's the way the game is going. I think that's the way the game has gone. And I think that's why, Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts and Josh Allen and Justin Herbert and those guys are so successful and are the future of the league.
So that brings up a question in my head, Coach, where we're talking about, quarterbacks having to be able to run the ball and not so much being a direct runner. But do you think that at some point, some of these guys that we're talking about, Allen, probably Hurts, Lamar, definitely, guys that are going to be running the ball, when they start taking these hits and they start, because they're taking additional hits as runners moving down the field, does that impact their mechanics as they take more hits and maybe, form bad habits?
Yeah, I think so. I think fatigue and I think taking hits creates that. But again, I wouldn't, for me, I don't compare Lamar Jackson to those guys because I think Lamar Jackson is a pure runner. I don't, and don't get me wrong, he's gotten better and they've done a good job with him. But if you watch Jalen Hurts and you study his film, he doesn't take a lot of big hits. Jalen Hurts runs RPO, he gets 5 or 6 and he gets down. And Josh Allen does too, unless it's, 3rd and 1, he's trying to get that 1 yard. But I think Lamar Jackson takes different hits than those guys do because he's such a designated runner. And I think he just has to be smart. Unfortunately, when he came into the league, he was a little bit thinner than he is now. And taking hits like that are always going to have an effect on your throwing motion. But at the end of the day, if you understand that you're taking hits and you get down and you do things that Jalen Hurts is doing, I think those guys are going to be all right because I think that's where we're going. So it doesn't – I think they're coaching that into them and they're working it in at practice. I know in today, if you go to college practice today, that stuff is worked in at practice where they're teaching guys to get down and teaching guys how to avoid contact. And, so I think when a QB runs – he shouldn't run like a running back. He should run to get positive yards, and then he needs to get his butt down, especially in the NFL.
Absolutely. And I think I'm thinking also, when I'm thinking about hits, I'm not just thinking about it as a runner, because sometimes you have to maneuver in that pocket, and you're going to get blasted blindside. You get a left tackle messes up or whatever, misses an assignment, and you get blasted. So it's additional hits on top of what you already take as a quarterback in the pocket. And I did wonder if that – if that is the issue, and you've dealt with quarterbacks that maybe didn't take as many hits with the offensive line that you had in Florida, but
I think guys that take hits in the pocket, I think it affects the game, their game more than it does runners that take hits downfield, personally, because being insecure about your offensive line is way different from taking a hit as you're running downfield. You know what I mean? Because now your vision changes, right? Now you're in the pocket and your eyes are at the ground instead of upfield. So, and I agree with you. I think taking hits in the pocket, blindsided hits and hits at your knees and ankles are a lot more volatile than escaping, running downfield and sliding. So I do think taking hits in the pocket affect throwing mechanics and the ability to read the field. But I do think it's not as critical as a Jalen Hurts who's running downfield and taking hits, if that makes sense.
Right. So how would you refocus him as a coach? Like kind of pull him in, maybe in game. Yeah. How do you get them refocused?
Well, first of all, that's a play caller's problem, right? So number one, a lot of play callers don't call plays to help their offensive line. For example, if you go empty or if you motion the back and you go 5-man protection every play, your quarterback's going to get killed, right? So like what I'm saying is the offensive coordinator, boot, sprint out, quick game. There's things offensive coordinators can do to give their quarterback more confident and help him when there's bad protection going on. Oh, and by the way, bad protection doesn't always mean the offensive line isn't good. A lot of times the quarterback doesn't check the right blocking scheme at the line of scrimmage or doesn't get rid of the football. For example, if quick game protection is called and every offensive lineman falls down and the quarterback gets sacked, that's on him because quick game is catch, step, throw, right? Yeah. So, but now every Monday morning quarterback on TV is screaming the O-line sucks, but they don't realize it's quick game. So the purpose of quick game is catch, step, throw. You're not supposed to take a drop. You're supposed to catch, step, throw, pre-snap. So, I think there's things that offensive coordinators should do to help a kid who's getting beat up in the pocket. Me personally, when I was calling plays, I believe in starting the game with boot or sprint out or a quick, easy pass like a slant or bubble so it gets the quarterback in a groove before. I think you should never start a game with a dig or a post or a big route like that. That's just my opinion because I like QBs to get into a groove before they start having that confidence to let it rip.
I like that. I agree with that. Especially in the preseason, you see a lot of these guys. Like this past weekend, a lot of the rookies they were talking about it before, but they were like, all these guys are going to get that quick, little sprint out action or some sort of easy something to get them going. Right. And then Bryce Young's first pass was like a full field read. They went empty, like trips on one side, and they made him read like stick and they had a dig and a flat and like a whatever. But I was like, that's the first pass you give Bryce Young. Sure enough, he executes it, but it was just kind of funny because so many of them got the cupcakes for their first toss, and Bryce Young gets a full field 5-man routes thing. So I was like, geez Louise, man. But
yeah. That's always tough on your first NFL throw if you're the first round draft pick. That's barely 5'8". That's always tough.
Dang.
Man,
I think he didn't measure. He measured 5'10".
I love Bryce Young. I think he's a genius. I think he's a stud. Any guy his size go to Alabama and did what he did. Not many guys can do that. I think he's a phenomenal human being. I think he's a phenomenal athlete. But I mean, he's going to have to mature in the NFL now.
Yeah, it's no secret he's very little, and he's got a small frame too. So he's got an uphill battle with that.
Right.
Can I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Tom. Thanks, Coach. Is it easier as a coach also to like I think about Josh Allen? He was a total gunslinger. He was throwing to a future insurance salesman at Wyoming, so it kind of felt like his accuracy was all over the place. But I never really felt that way. He was just a very creative thrower to me, and he was trying to do things to guys that couldn't make plays for him. But he was definitely willing to throw it around the yard. Is that easier to coach versus a guy who's scared to make plays and kind of holds the ball longer and he's not sure when to test certain windows and certain looks? Would you have is it easier to coach something into someone or try and, dial back Josh Allen a little bit? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I put, and Aaron Rodgers is one of those guys, right? That he wants to throw into that 3 defender window. Right. And I think you'd rather have a guy that is not afraid to do that and kind of get him to understand down and distance. Like if it's 2nd and 1, do you throw a dig with an over the top safety, a Sam linebacker underneath him, and a Mike linebacker in the Tampa 2 zone? Do you throw that dig on 2nd and 1, or do you throw it in the dirt and go 3rd and 1? Right. So for me, I like a guy that can put it in that window and who's not afraid to put it in that window, because some guys who are afraid are going to take sacks. But the problem with that is they need to understand the game and they need to understand down and distance. And since you brought it up, I do want to reiterate, Josh Allen, I hate that all those ESPN guys that were crushing Josh Allen about his throwing percentage at Wyoming clearly are clueless and don't understand the game, because you are 1,000% right. And it drove me crazy. The kids throwing, first of all, no offense to Wyoming either. I think it's a great program. But to compare the kids that he's throwing to versus Jalen Hurts at Oklahoma and Tua at Alabama and Justin Herbert at Oregon, it was so disrespectful. And, those comparisons, to say he had like a 56%, whatever it was in college, and then he goes to the pros and lights it up. That's a perfect example of misanalyzation of a young man in college, because he was a freak. And he's, in my opinion, he's the best quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion.
I agree with that. I don't want to say it too loud because I'll get canceled on football Twitter, but I agree with that.
Well, here's the only thing I'm going to tell you. I have this argument about Mahomes all the time. All I'm saying is if you swap them teams, is Buffalo as good and is Kansas City as good? I think Kansas City is still as good, and I'm not sure Buffalo's as good. I'm being real. But you got to be careful, because
fair. First
of all, I love Patrick Mahomes. I think he's a freak. I saw him on the Netflix series. He's a phenomenal human being. What he's done, what he did at Texas Tech. So this isn't a hit on him, right? It's greatness and greatness. But what I'm saying is, you got to understand, he fell into the perfect storm. Now, he earned it and deserved it, okay? And he took complete advantage of it, but he fell into the perfect storm. And having those offensive minds, Bieniemy and Andy Reid, and having that group of coaches plus that group of offensive players around you is pretty darn good. Not a lot of guys could have even named some of the offensive players on Buffalo when Josh Allen got there, right? I think they had a big-time receiver. I forgot his name, but a lot of guys couldn't even mention those guys. And you remember in the playoffs, they went tit for tat. So, for me, 6'6", runs the way he does, throws at 70, throws into tight windows.
Yeah. Yeah, he's an alien of a human being. The way he,
But
I
no,
don't. Josh Allen really
this
doesn't
is a
have many
great-
weaknesses.
This is a great point the coach is bringing up too, because it's not even just that. It's look at the coaches. Look at the coaches.
Yeah.
You got
Most
an
people
all-time
don't
great.
know the name of the OC at Buffalo.
Well, right now, no. I can tell you a couple
That's
years
what I'm
ago,
saying.
Dable.
I don't either. That's my point.
Brian Dable.
right?
Dable goes to the Giants, has a great year, obviously. But I'm saying, look at the. Everybody knows that's Nagy's, not Nagy. Excuse me, sorry. Andy Reid's scheme in Kansas City.
Yeah.
Nagy's the OC there now.
Well, Andy Reid's team and Bieniemy was one of the highly touted OCs, in the last couple of years, right? So he had Andy Reid plus he had
not his
Bieniemy.
scheme, though, Coach. It's
What's that?
Andy's. It's not his scheme. It's Andy's.
No. You're 100% right. You're 100% right. But I do feel like you're right. But I do feel like Bieniemy understood that it was Andy's scheme and understood how to call and coach within Andy's scheme. But at the end of the day, he was surrounded by great coaches and great players on the offensive side immediately, and a darn good offensive line.
Absolutely, yeah. And they beefed up. They got Patrick to help, and he went and won another Super Bowl. So he's got probably one of the best tight ends of all time with him too, and Travis Kelce. I mean, I'm just saying, just look at the head coaches. It's Reid and it's a defensive mastermind in Sean McDermott. You know what I'm saying? Like, advantage, definitely Kansas City. You're raising a really good point that I hadn't really even thought too much about because it was just, it's Mahomes who's number one. But when you do think of the overall skill set of Allen, there is a very valid argument there. Absolutely.
Yeah. So my comparison to AR, is Allen for me. So when I see AR and I see the way he played in the SEC, my comparison is actually Allen. A lot of guys make other comparisons, and I don't understand why. Because if you look at him and look at how raw he was at Florida and look at some of the things he did with his legs and his arm, he's actually I thought he was the best guy out of the draft last year. Not everybody agreed, but I think he's going to be the best quarterback that came out of last year's draft if we're patient. But he has a chance to be an absolute freak very soon.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And perfect timing to bring him up too, because he's just became the week one starter for the Indianapolis Colts. So
I saw that. Yeah, sir.
Yeah, which surprised. I think that surprised all of us. Honestly, we were thinking he would probably sit for a few weeks coming into the league, but
right. So the question is, so do they protect him? Right? Do they run him every play like Lamar? Do they run some RPO like they did with Jalen Hurts, right? So at this point in time, we know how talented he is. Is the OC going to do what's right with him, right? Back to the OC.
I
right?
say yes. Yeah, I say yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
I do too. So I'm excited about the Colts, man. I feel like the NFL's better when the Colts can compete.
The AFC is definitely better. Yeah, it's really fun to watch.
I'll say as living in Nashville and as somebody that's like, close with the Titans, I have to agree those are always better games when they're tight.
Yeah.
I know too many people on the Titans to 1,000% agree, but
Yeah.
So we'll leave it at that. Now, Coach, the evolution of the position overall. Because I've talked with you a lot about this, like not on a show or anything, but, picking your brain, looking at schematics and kind of figuring out where that's all going. And we talked, off the air about, reads and like your 1-2-3 progression sort of fading away into obscurity. It's not really something that's competent, that really allows the quarterback to be competent. I mean, there's certain guys that can still do it, but they're very rare. They're very few and far between. So where overall is the evolution of the position headed towards?
Yeah, I think we will always teach reads, okay? But what I'm saying is there was a time in the NFL where the concept of playing in the NFL was it doesn't matter if you're an athlete, you're gonna get taught to throw the ball downfield, you're gonna get taught to read the field, you're gonna get taught to take a 5 or 7 step drop, right? You're gonna get taught to protection. So what I'm saying is if you watch enough college football, you'll realize that not many guys are reading the field. First of all, RPO identifies the primary and secondary read right off the bat, right? If it's an RPO run, he's reading the DN or the 3 technique, and then that read, if he keeps it, that read moves to the outside linebacker or the Mike, right? So in RPO, transitional reads is you're looking at and identifying a player. You are not reading the field, okay? Second thing, quick game. Quick game is a catch, step, throw, or throw it out of bounds. Boot and sprint out. Boot and sprint out breaks the field into a third, right? So if you're sprinting right, your read is the right third of the field, okay? If you're and same thing with boot. 90 guys don't throw the backside post on boot unless it's called from the press box, right? So if I run boot and I see backside post, the quarterback can't see it because it's behind his head. So then the next time I call it, I tell the quarterback, check the backside post. So what I'm saying is, in order to sit back and actually do a full field read, number one, it's not protected enough because you need 3 to 4 seconds. And a lot of guys we don't play football in 7 and 8 man protection anymore. The NFL does, but high school and colleges don't, right? High school and colleges are in 10 personnel and 11 personnel and 20 personnel. They don't, like, it's very rare that they keep 2 backs in for protection. And we're in a world where those guys get into the flats and run routes, and they like defenders to defend. So yes, I think the evolution of football is going to turn into a game where it's almost exclusive RPO with the occasional read the field based on past concepts. But I can argue that they're not even reading the field on past concepts because the coach is calling it based on coverage. So for example, if I'm throwing curl flat against cover 3 or cover 4, I know where I'm going to the ball regardless of reading the field because I know what window I'm throwing into when I'm throwing curl flat. So yes, I think the evolution of the game is turning into more of an athletic RPO, sprint out, boot type of game. And I think a lot of guys are getting a little bit more predominant with that pre-snap throw and knowing where to go with the ball post-snap.
Wow,
Justin?
that was good. Yeah, that was good. I'm just listening, man.
Coach, I'm going to tell you something right now. Justin is not normally the guy that's sitting back here just like Justin is the loud, opinionated person, and you're kind of blowing his mind. And I knew that was going to happen. So,
Justin, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate the fact that you even you guys are giving me consideration, man.
No, I'm just enjoying myself today. I promise you that. So I appreciate learning and just being able to listen. This is amazing. I think I remember evaluating Jameis Winston coming out of Florida State and watching him in Jimbo Fisher's system, thinking like, this is such a true read the field based on this coverage, this tiny thing will change and this route will change and this route. And I remember thinking like, this is so unfair to ask of a college quarterback to do because he is doing things like some NFL quarterbacks aren't doing. And then you'll turn on Gundy's Oklahoma State offense and it's like, throw the 9, maybe a curl, throw the 9. And now where we are today, it's like college offenses are all so wide open and easy and different. And the way you look at the field and read it as a quarterback is just infinitely different. And
before you answer that, Coach, I have to quote the great Mark Gorsak here for a second and go, what conference are you talking about with Gundy? What conference is that?
Big 12.
Oh, okay. See,
what I was going to say is on your Florida State comment, I want to add to that. If you don't recall, they lost the national championship to a Mariota, Oregon team who ran RPO every single play. And if you look back in the first half of that game, they went Trey. So for me, some guys call it trip, some guys call it Trey, some guys call it trio. If you go back and look at the first half of that game, Oregon ran Trey, which is trips on one side, and the tight end on the opposite side is a nub. So he's not wide, he's attached, right? Yep. So they ran that formation the entire first half and went RPO, and Florida State had no idea how to handle it. So, I don't mean to chop you off with the Florida State analysis, but that's a good depiction of a game that have possibly turned the tide of what Chip Kelly was doing at Oregon and Mariota to what Jimbo was trying to do at Florida State. If that, you know what I'm saying?
No, I totally agree.
And it's not just you know, that the NFL, the read the field scheme has died in college. Like nobody does it anymore. I think it's just it lacks effectiveness. And it's like if you go look at what Jalen did this year, and Shane Steichen drew up for him in Philadelphia. You got a lot of beaters. You figure out what the coverage is and you throw it. You throw the beater. And that allowed him to get through the picture. Of what's going on. The only real adjustment that he was making is going from, the pre-snap to post-snap picture. Did it change? And make that adjustment, throw the beater.
Well, the guy that doesn't get enough credit for this generational change into RPO is Dana Holgorsen. And I used to watch Dana Holgorsen back in the day. And here's what we realized. We realized that slot receivers, who for the most part are the smallest guy on the offense, we were asking him to block a Sam linebacker who was a 6'3", 240-pound monster, right? So we were asking him to block him on run plays. And we did that for years. We asked this 5'8", 5'9" scat back to block that guy every single play because he was the force player. So instead, what we said is, let's read that guy and make him either come to the run play or chase this 5'9" guy. And when we realized that's what we should do, then RPO came to life because now we're not asking guys to block guys that they shouldn't be blocking. So I think, instead of that slot receiver blocking that monster, now he's running a bubble route or a slant route, which is more productive for that young man also, and it keeps him healthy. It's not, over the years, we're running sweep to that guy, and that poor slot receiver's blocking a linebacker. And I'm like, geez, that's clearly not right.
Let's just throw a pop pass to him instead. We don't need to make him block.
Ironically, you mentioned Dana Holgorsen. He's at University of Houston, is he not? Right now?
Yes.
Oh, is he now? Because he wasn't he at West? No. Is he? Was he at West?
Yeah, he was at West Virginia.
Yeah. He left West Virginia to go to Houston, and they just moved to the Big 12 this year, which former co-host here, Matt Ungashik, just officially was hired by the University of Houston today.
Wow.
So
that's
crazy circle right there, right?
Good stuff. Good stuff.
So he gets to go. So coach is over here going, hey, Dana doesn't get enough credit for that. And now Matt's learning from him. I'm jealous. I'm going to hit up Matt.
Yeah, you need to hit him up. Dana's a genius, man. He doesn't, I don't think he gets enough credit for being a genius.
And if you think about too, Houston's had some slot receivers the last few years. Take Dell, just came out this year. And sure. Dell made that freaking crazy catch in New Orleans, against New England, excuse me. And touchdown catch off the it wasn't so much
preseason.
Him. Well, yeah, it wasn't so much like the route that he ran or anything, but it's just the fact he came off the ball. But
yeah, but remember, Dana was at West Virginia when Pat White and that group of guys were there. You remember that talented group?
Oh, Steve Slayton was there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he had dudes
Tavon
up there.
Austin.
Right.
There's a slot receiver right there, Tavon.
Absolutely.
Yep. Stedman Bailey. Yeah, those are good years. Those are good years for college football.
Those were good years. They were entertaining to watch.
So that's funny too, because that means that, so if he was at West Virginia at that point, that's the Wildcat offense, correct?
Somewhat, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, because they started incorporating that Wildcat with Pat White. And
they did. But I think, of course, that Wildcat term was something I think the NFL kind of started because it was new to them. But right. I think college guys were subbing in the running back to run these plays. They weren't calling it Wildcat. I think it was just packages in their offense. And I think the NFL, because the NFL was so against it was so against quarterbacks running and all that kind of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So they came up with this Wildcat name and realized that nowadays it's the norm.
Yeah, because David Lee brought that over, who is quarterback's coach, university. He was in Miami Dolphins. Brought that over when they brought Pat White in, and he ended up winning. He was assistant coach of the year, if I remember.
I think
correctly,
he was, yeah,
because he brought the Wildcat in and was able to successfully do something with it.
I remember that.
Yeah, that's crazy. And David Lee I think he's an analyst now I can't remember what team he's working for or organization, but. Crazy stuff. Vanderbilt alumni right there. Nashville, baby.
Yes, sir.
Coach, Any last plugs? Anything else that you can throw out before we go ahead and wrap this thing up today?
No, I mean, I'm humbled. I appreciate you guys having me on. I'm not a biomechanics genius like some of these other guys out there. I try to coach and teach the game the way it should be coached. So, but I appreciate you guys having me on. Not expected, humbled, and you guys keep doing your thing, man. I definitely follow from afar.
Absolutely, and thank you, Coach, for your time. And
Yes.
always get something out of talking to Coach George.
I wish it could be a few more hours, but hey,
Appreciate
thank
it,
you so
boys.
much for
It'll be
coming
soon.
on.
It'll be soon, man. It'll be soon.
All right, talk soon. I appreciate you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Coach. Wow, what a
Oh my goodness.
just your face over there was great. Your face, like I don't see you look like that very often. And that's
It's
what made that
rare to meet somebody that just knows so much, but he also he goes back so far and knows so many people and has been around so many. Like the game has changed right in front of him for so many years, but he doesn't seem like he's overwhelmed by it or like he's too old school to accept it. He's just so like willing to adapt and be okay with everything going on around him and teach it. It's
military training, bro. It's military training. That's how we're taught, bro. Buddy.
crazy people, man.
That's how it is.
Yeah.
1,000% put it on the military. So, but yeah, that's about gonna wrap up our show here, guys. Next week, what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk more about quarterbacks. We got all the insight this week, and next week we're gonna actually start really going into it and breaking down different stuff. A lot like we did linebackers last week. And quarterbacks is, first off, it's the most popular, it's the most important position on the field. Yeah, I know that there's a lot of quarterback content out there, but there's not quarterback content like Coach George breaking it down, and there's not really quarterback content looking at busts and figuring out where they went wrong. So that's what we got for you right here next week on the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel. So, Justin, you got anything else you want to throw out before we wrap this thing up?
No, man, I'm just happy to have Tom on, and we'll age ourselves next week and talk about some of the past prospects and some superlatives, and we'll get into some cool stuff next week. It'll be fun.
Absolutely. Yep. So go ahead, Shane. Let's go ahead. Thank you all. Back at it next week right here on the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Draft Vogel on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.